I wouldn't recommend people to not entering into entrepreneurship, but I would suggest them to be smart about it, because many people enter the scene and they think in 6 months I will have a running business, or 1 or 2 years, then I will make $1 million of dollars. That's not going to happen. I mean, it's like trying to win the lottery. One of the great things about dealing with this chronic issues is that it forced me to go into different directions. And what I was doing before to my body, I was now trying to do to my mind, like to really go deep and to reflect on myself. Like a game, it was really a game changer for me to say, okay, this is what this is the hand I'm dealt with right now. I cannot change that. I cannot push through. That approach doesn't work. But the best thing I can do is to accept that situation for what it is right now and just try to manage my energy. You can think of it as a blueprint, like an internal psychological blueprint, like how you are made up. The archetypes are a lot about meaning making. You could say it's like you're planted a seed inside of your psyche, and maybe that seed is an acorn, and you know that you're supposed to be an oak. So if you're trying to be an apple tree, you will have a very hard time because that's not your blueprint.
Welcome to Out of Place, where we speak with the ones who are challenging the status quo, leading from curiosity, doing things differently, and above all, have felt out of place somewhere along the way.
We've got real stories, honest lessons, a few laughs, and maybe some tears about building an aligned business and life from people who've been there, are there, or just getting started. We're your hosts, Anne and Paul.
You're exactly where you need to be. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to Out of Place. Today I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Philipp. Philipp's journey began in the quiet space of an only child, someone who learned early to trust their inner voice over the crowd. He studied computer science and faced pressure to follow society's promising path. But something deeper was calling. At 14, he started experimenting with design and branding just for fun, and discovered a truth that would reshape everything. You don't need credentials or society's permission to become who you're meant to be. Today, Philipp runs Serapex, a brand studio that goes far beyond aesthetics. He's a self-taught coach and designer who rejects toxic hustle culture and teaches people about their archetypes and how to build solo businesses rooted in their true calling, designed for freedom rather than endless scaling. But the deepest transformation came through long COVID. What began as unexplained fatigue evolved into a health crisis that stripped away his achiever mindset. The person who used to do 1,000 pull-ups just for fun and listen to audiobooks at 3 times speed. It shifted his entire life question from what should I do to what is life asking of me. Through his archetype work, he helps creators and entrepreneurs discover their purpose, not by following external frameworks, but by trusting the guide within themselves. Welcome, Philipp.
First of all, thanks for the kind introduction and thanks for having me today. I'm excited to join this conversation today.
And thanks for thanks again, Anne. And just again, Philipp, welcome to Out of Place. I love the intro and I'm really looking forward to getting into some questions. I just love that how from such a young age you diverted away from societal expectations and started to build your own thing from a very young age. And as growing up as an only child, you've often felt isolated and you were drawn to being alone rather than being part of a crowd. So looking back on that now, how did that early solitude actually become the foundation for trusting yourself over what society was maybe expecting from you?
Well, it came quite naturally to me because I was growing up as an only child. So being alone and being without brothers and sisters forces you, or you're more surrounded by grown-ups. So rather than being with other childs, many times you're with other grown-ups and you start to adapt to that environment. But also because, a lot of experiences in my childhood and also the way I was raised, I felt somewhat special. I mean, it's It's sad to be like the only child, that they are the favorites of the parents, and I'm lucky that this was the case for me, because that gave me like a very secure environment to grow up, and also allowed me to be myself. And it's not that I was isolated from other people. It's more like I chose to be different, and then you naturally differentiate from others, and it's a hard time to connect with them, because that never came naturally for me, connecting with other people. I mean, I like to be surrounded by other people, but my default mode is to be alone, because that's how most of my childhood was, that I was by myself. I can remember how I was having my cousins were coming over a lot, so I spent a lot of time with them, but then at some point they left, and then I was by myself again.
Yeah. And something that kind of made me giggle inside was that security you spoke about growing up with being a lonely child. Both Anne and I are middle children, the third youngest in our family. So to me, that was very funny, because I think about a lot of my insecurities, and, you know, with being the third youngest, maybe it does come from that, I guess, just environment that you're exposed to. So yeah, completely resonates.
And with that, your upbringing of being an only child, with the support of your family and your parents, did that help you or give you the validation that you needed to trust yourself and to, you know, doing things differently? So say, for example, when you're 14, you started experimenting with the design and branding just for fun. Is that moment where you realize, well, I don't need the external validation or credentials to allow me to be who I want to be?
I wouldn't really think about the external credential or validation at all in that time. I mean, as I was saying, like, I was growing up in a secure environment, and lucky for me, also my mom was trusting in myself, and that helped me to also trust myself. But also, I am very curious, like from a very young age. I would experiment with chemistry. I would do like some detective plays, and there was always something. So there was always a phase, as long as I can remember. There was always something. So like some small obsessions came up through that. So this thing with the came up naturally. Like, I was on my computer, and somehow some things popped up. I don't even remember how I got into that. I saw some tutorials and I just started. And also it gave me a lot of pleasure. That's why I really like doing that.
Yeah. And you mentioned curiosity, and I think curiosity is actually like it's a hidden superpower, because your curiosity can take you in any direction. But going back to that, I guess, your adolescent in late teens, and you kind of presented with a safe path versus your true path. So you studied computer science, which maybe was the kind of safe choice, but you felt much more pulled towards this kind of creative work, this health and this fitness. Going back to the introduction quickly, you know, Anne mentioned you used to do 1,000 pull-ups just for fun. So obviously fitness was a big part of your life. Was there at any point any internal conflict between the computer science path you were going down and the kind of more creative path with the design work? And was there a period where you kind of finally gave yourself permission just to really follow what called you?
Yeah, I can remember that. Before I was studying computer science, I remember like everyone was saying what they are going to do and what they're going to study, or like what path they will choose. And also our teacher kind of gave a recommendation, like, what are your strengths? Like, you're good at math. That's what he said to me. And for a long time, I had no clue, until we were like in this group and everyone was talking what they were going to do. And I was like, yeah, I think I will go for computer science. I mean, it was not something that I was really drawn to, but it feels like a sensible path. Like, you can make a lot of money with that, and I'm kind of good at math, so why not do that? But yeah, there was definitely a moment when I realized that this is not the path for me. It really started after the first semester, when I saw like there are a lot of people who are really interested into computer science, and the only thing that I was interested in was maths. And I was like, should I study math then? No clue. I mean, doesn't feel like the right choice either. But I gave it like another semester, and I realized I also enjoy programming, because you can be very creative in programming. You can go into flow. So it's sort of related to designing, but in a different way. And there's this creative part in there, which I really liked. But then there was another point where I was doing an internship that was part of my studies, and also then following up with a bachelor thesis. And I was sitting with some colleagues in a software development company. And there was this moment when one of the colleagues was asking, "What are you doing for Christmas?" And then there was one girl from product development, and she was saying, "I will play my PlayStation 4 or 3 or whatever." And the other guys sitting around, one of them was like, "What? You're going to play PlayStation for if you're bored during Christmas? I will analyze some crash dumps." And in that moment, I was like, "What? I'm so in the wrong place. I mean, I neither want to play PlayStation nor I want to analyze some crash dumps. I mean, but I was at that point like almost finishing my studies, and I was like, I'm screwed." And at that point, it came up to me, so why not study psychology? At that point, that was like a really interesting thing for me. And so my plan was to study psychology, but my credentials were not suited enough for me to enter. And I felt like I don't want to waste time. So in that time, in that semester, I will just start a computer masters. That's how I ended up in the computer masters. And I didn't study psychology because I thought, I don't want to study like from zero again. Let's finish this masters.
And so, how long did the masters take you to complete? And as you were doing it, were you thinking, I should have changed? I should have, taken a different direction?
Yeah, it was going 3 years in total. And honestly, during the masters, there was like a different environment. It wasn't like that computer science nerdy part. I mean, there were some nerds, but there were some more normal people, I would say. And it was a lot of fun. I really liked it. I really enjoyed a lot of parts about it. And then during my master thesis, I was about to develop a conversational UI, it was called. That's nowadays called Alexa or Siri, to use that to control an ERP system that they're using in a business context. I wasn't eager to do that, but there was just now no better option. And I was searching for almost 6 months for a place. I wanted to do mobile development. I felt drawn to that, but I couldn't find a spot for doing that with my master's thesis. So I got this offer and started doing that. And at some point, during those 6 months of trying to find my place for a master thesis, I came across entrepreneurship. I remember a friend telling me, "Digital nomads, that's so you." That's what she said. And I was like, okay, no clue. So typed in digital nomads in Google, and I was drawn into it. I don't remember exactly, but I was in this digital nomad scene, and at some point making money online came up, and there was Amazon FBA as a business model. I was like, that seems interesting. So during that time when I was searching for a place for my master thesis, I also got in contact with entrepreneurship, and I felt interested. So I was playing around with that, but also doing my master's thesis. And then there was one moment during that master thesis, I went to work and I was like, I don't know the boss of this company. Neither does the boss know me. Neither does anyone in the company know what I'm doing. I had an advisor, but he was very busy, like a typical workaholic, never available. So he was the only guy in the whole company knowing what I'm doing. So I enter in the company and nobody knew what I was doing. And at one point I decided I don't like going to the office. I will just do it from my home. So I didn't go to the office for 2 weeks. No one cared. I came back 2 weeks later and one of my colleagues said, "You have been in holidays." And I was like, "No, I was just working from home." So at that point, I was like, what the hell am I doing? This is not what I want to do. And I felt way more drawn to this entrepreneurship at that point. And honestly, at that point, I was also really about to quit. I thought it really doesn't make sense. I don't want to go into that direction. If I do my own thing, I don't need a paper. So why waste more time? Luckily, in the end, I finished my master's thesis because there was like 3 more months of work, and then went to Thailand to find myself.
To taste the digital nomad journey, just reflecting on what you shared with us there, would you say that that was a period in your life, and I'm interested to see how this works with your upbringing as well, with being, a single child. Was that environment that you were in, was that somewhere where you felt out of place?
I mean, I could see people who were really drawn to the whole computer science stuff. They were doing that in their free time. I was not doing that. So I was like, this doesn't seem like something I'm supposed to do, but it wasn't really clearly in my head. It it really came when I came into contact with entrepreneurship, and I was like, this is what I should have done my whole life. This is me. And I realized it's not about starting a company, because you can also do it by yourself. So this whole Amazon FBA thing was also about, I mean, it was sold as passive income, like all the business models. But in the end, it was something you can do by your own. You don't need a huge company. You don't need a lot of capital to start that. And I was like, yeah, that feels very natural to me. I can work from wherever I want. I can do it by myself. I'm my own boss. I can control everything because I also have a very strong need to control things. So it's not that easy to work with other people. But also from having my own rhythm, having my own schedule, that was felt very natural to me.
I find it really interesting that you share your entrepreneurship, entry point and how you got into it, and also the different types of forms of it that you've tried out. One thing that you do right now is you write a Substack newsletter, Serapex, and part of that, the content that you produce and share there, is about rejecting hustle culture and the billion-dollar startup fantasy, which I think a lot of people do fall into, especially when they hear about digital nomads or they hear about, solopreneur and entrepreneurship. So from an essay that you've actually written is why you should not become an entrepreneur. Your inside view of that particular trap. So what did you discover on the other side of entrepreneurship that people should know?
Because I'm naturally curious, I get drawn into things very quickly. There are some people, they will think through it like, I will have to do this, I will have to do this, these are the downsides, and businesses can fail. It never occurred to me. I mean, I knew that businesses could fail, but it was never really present for me. And at that point, also this idea of becoming Steve Jobs came into my head. I would never articulate that. That's only something I could later discover, that I was drawn into that idea of creating something great and making a dent into the universe, how he called it. And it puts a lot of pressure on you because you feel like you have to do this grand thing. And many years, and also starting client work, I could see that it really is not that easy. It's not that, how to say, I mean, there's no 100% guarantee. Like businesses fail and they fail 90% of the time. And that's a statistic most people don't want to hear. They hear it, but they think it doesn't apply to them. That's exactly how I felt. I was like, yeah, but my idea is better and I can outwork them. I can outsmart them. Yeah, I mean, like there's a big illusion in your head in that moment. And I think a lot of people entering into the scene, they entering with this illusion because especially the creator economy, they want to sell you the idea of starting your own thing. And this is a viable path and that you can make money with your passion. And it seems like it's very easy. And I wouldn't recommend people to not entering into entrepreneurship, but I would suggest them to be smart about it because many people enter the scene and they think in 6 months I will have a running business. Or as I was thinking, yeah, 1 or 2 years and I will make $1 million. That's not going to happen. I mean, it's like trying to win the lottery. You can try to buy a ticket, but the chances that you're going to win are very slim. And like having these statistics, this math, this probability thinking or strategic thinking entering, I think that's a very crucial thing to have. But I'm not sure if that's something you can teach people. I feel like people have to make that experience, because if someone told me that when I was starting, I would ignore that.
Yeah. And we've covered this in a previous podcast as well with Claire. It's this expectation on time. And when you're exposed to people, let's look at today's world, Stephen Bartlett and stuff, like highly, highly successful entrepreneur. But if you look back at his story, it took him, years of consistency to really, I guess, hit that tipping point where he started to become, more well known.
Yeah, I just published an article today about the problem of survivorship bias. And I think that is one of the biggest thing. You see all the people who made it, but you don't see the huge graveyard of people who didn't make it. There are so many reasons why people didn't make it, but having wrong expectations is running among the tops of them, I guess.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about your upbringing and I guess your pivot to follow entrepreneurship. But back, in around 2019 when COVID came, you had an experience where your body literally just said no. And long COVID fundamentally changed you, from someone who, like we said before, could do those pull-ups, for fun and listen to audiobooks at 3 times the speed, to someone who had to learn that pushing harder doesn't always work, especially when your body's not physically capable of it. Can you walk us through what it was like when your body kind of almost forced you to abandon that achiever mindset?
I would say that was one of the hardest lessons to learn. Probably, the hardest thing for me ever happening in my life, because until this point, everything was going really, really good for me. So during COVID, I was actually not thinking that much about COVID itself. There were these lockdowns and I was isolating myself and I was doing a huge amount of workouts. I mean, that's when those 1,000 pull-ups were happening. And I kind of enjoyed that a lot, like going crazy into that direction, but also reading a huge amount of books, learning a lot of things and working like 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day, and everything packing into one day, waking up at 4 a.m. and doing all those kind of things, like the typical hustle mindset, trying to do everything. And it worked. That's the thing. Like it kind of worked for me for a long time. And in 2022, I could relax a bit more with my business. So I was working a bit less and trying to enjoy life more. And for me, enjoying life turned into dancing. So I was doing probably around 20 hours a week of dancing, going to classes, going to parties, practicing, but also doing my gym stuff, listening to the audiobooks, and also doing my business. That I would say was, looking at that now, I would say like that was the peak of exploiting everything. For me, it was working good. I could recover everything until I catch COVID it was in June 2022. Like I had some symptoms, I had some fever, I was recovering and everything seemed normal again. So I was going back to my schedule. But then like step by step, I felt like something is off. I started to feel worse. I mean, the days back then, they were like 11 out of 10, 10 out of 10. That was like a normal. It was like I was high all the time. It was extremely enjoyable. So when it started to wear a bit off, like when you go back to reality in a way, I felt like something is off. But it was not just affecting my mood; it was also affecting my recovery. And I could see that with my heart rate variability going down step by step, resting heart rate going up. And I was like, I, I, I do rest. So why is it not getting better? And it was getting worse and worse by the month until a point where I was like, okay, I cannot train. I'll have to take off 2 weeks. I will just take off 2 weeks. And it didn't help. But the point when I realized that I have to take care of my body and I just can't do what I have been doing before. It was a process happening over several months because it was really, really hard for me to give that up, to say, okay, I can't do that. I cannot push through it. It just doesn't work. That was my approach, always to push through it, and it worked. But now it didn't work. So I was kind of lost. Nothing, all my tools, all my super achiever stuff, which you learn about cold baths and whatever, it just didn't work. Nothing of that worked. So I was kind of lost, and I was like, what can I do? And yeah, it took me a very long time to surrender to that experience, and it's still costing me a lot of work to deal with it.
Yeah, like having an illness, a prolonged illness, a chronic illness, or an injury has similar impacts to your life, where there are things that you used to be able to do, those 10 out of 10 days and 11 out of 10 days, and then it reduces you down quite a lot, substantially, because a lot of us have the rituals that we go to, like the cold plunges or the sauna and ice baths and everything else. And that is part of how we usually lift ourselves, get those dopamine hits and get them up and running. But when you have a chronic illness, it doesn't have that impact anymore. And so you have to really adjust your life, not just your lifestyle, but your life, your business, how you operate. It has a real full-on effect in terms of who you are and your identity. So as you've kind of, faced this illness, which still, impacts you today, you had a moment where you questioned life, I believe. It's, it's where you went from, what should I do to what is life asking of me? So when did that moment of clarity happen for you?
I think that was in 2023 or 2024 when there was like a big moment when I was really confronting death at that point, because I don't know how to say, but these thoughts of I'm going to die are just coming up more frequently, because you feel like, what is wrong with me? Something doesn't work. My body seems to not work, and the doctors cannot tell me what it is. They cannot help me. So that creates a lot of fear, I would say. And this fear can show up in different ways, but this was like in that moment was showing up like really intensely. And I felt like this, I'm going to die, but seriously. And I couldn't get out of that thinking loop. And at that point, I could see and feel life very clear and without any illusions. And at that point, I was asking myself, okay, I can do a lot of things, but I will have to do what life is asking from me. I don't know how to explain that, because it's also a while back and it was a process, but that was basically triggering that. And facing your own mortality on this emotional level brings up just a different way of thinking. Like you start to think in a different way. And I could see that I cannot do everything. And so at that point, like my branding and design studio was going good. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. I mean, I was very comfortable, was making good money. I was monetizing my passion. I mean, I was living the dream. But I felt in that moment that that's not it. I cannot continue doing that, because that's not what I'm meant to do. And I cannot do everything. I have to do the one thing that I am born to do.
Yeah. So in some of your writing from previous conversations we've had, you've mentioned how suffering has kind of taught you this self-compassion and has helped you embrace, in, I guess, in your words, weirdness, your own weirdness, instead of chasing some ideal version of yourself, and again, societal's expectations. And this seems to be at the heart of the archetype work that you do, and it's assisting people to discover, who they are rather than who they think they should become. So what does that kind of process of self-discovery look like, especially for high achievers who have spent, their lives judging themselves harshly and about always kind of being about performance?
Yeah, one of the great things about dealing with this chronic issues is that it forced me to go into different directions. And what I was doing before to my body, I was now trying to do to my mind, like to really go deep and to reflect on myself. And the whole thing started off by me accepting the situation. It sounds so simple, but it is really like a game. It was really a game changer for me to say, okay, this is the hand I'm dealt with right now. I cannot change that. I cannot push through it. That approach doesn't work. It doesn't seem to be a viable path to get better, and I will not be able to change that like from one day to another. So the best thing I can do is to accept that situation for what it is right now and just try to manage my energy. That's something I don't want to do. I want to do all the things I have been doing before. I don't want to be limited in my life, but it's just not working. Like there were too many experiences telling me this is not working. So I will have to listen to what life is telling me. And that was like starting to accept the situation and then opening up to that self-compassion, which was the next step. I would say it was first self-acceptance, like accepting me, and then seeing for the first time what I was doing. Like for me, it was like I was doing these 1,000 pull-ups, but it felt normal for me. I can do it. And when people were saying, but you need to rest, like that's too much, I was like, yeah, but it works for me. And I started to realize how I was treating my body and that it was nice that it was working. Like if you want to get to a certain level, like you have to push. But at that point, I was like, I will also have to feel compassionate for myself, for my situation, which I am in right now, which is not confusing with self-pity. And that opened up for me to really better understand other people. Because, yeah, as I was saying, I had a great life. I was born in a very lucky environment. Things were going my way. So in my head, whenever someone was not reaching their goals or like when there was something, I was like, yeah, but you just have to change your mindset. Like you have to push through it. That's easy to say when everything is working fine. And at that point, I realized it's not that easy. I also had depressive symptoms. So I really started to see how it might be if you're really depressed. And I was like, this is awful. And it's not something you go into an ice bath and it goes away, or you do some running and it goes away. It doesn't work that easy. And that's when I really started to develop that compassion for other people and trying to see what is their situation. I don't know their backstory up, but I was trying to imagine that maybe this person is overweight, but I don't know the backstory. So I don't want to judge this person and saying, you just have to go to the gym and eat less. That might be the case, but you don't know what was going on there and how your brain is shaped through those experiences. And that was the question about the self-compassion. But you were asking another question. I was going a bit longer into that.
That's okay, because you mentioned something that for me is really important. There's so much information out there in today's world about biohacking, hacking. You mentioned ice baths, you've mentioned running and all that type of stuff. But if someone is actually going through depression or anxiety or all that different types of stuff, those things don't always apply. Because there's a human experience. There's a part of the experience of just being with what you're going through and not trying to escape it. And at least from my experience, people I've worked with in things like that, high achievers often can attach to something that helps them escape, let's just say, depression or anxiety through using different modalities. But at the end of the day, the foundation, it's always going to be there until you're able to sit with it, resolve it, and offer that self-compassion that you spoke about.
Yeah, exactly. That's also a bit where the archetype work comes in. I'm planning to write exactly an article about that achiever mindset and where it is coming from. So there's the seeker archetype who is curious, who want to find out new things, like who want to find and seek the truth, and also explore different countries, getting new experiences, but also trying to improve themselves. And to every archetype, there's a shadow. And this is the shadow side of the seeker archetype who gets out of balance and is very focused on this self-improvement thing. And this is usually coming from from some repressed parts of their psyche. And there's a counterpart to that. First of all, seeing that shadow part is extremely helpful because you can see where the energy is getting channeled into, because you can do it in a constructive way, or as in obsessive self-improvement, it's going into the shadow side. And recognizing that part is very important because it helps you to see what actually is going on inside of your psyche. But it also allows you to go into the different direction, use that energy of the self-improvement and channel it into something else and balance it with another archetype that helps you to bring that back into balance. And if you can see like how this profile of different archetypes in your psyche work, that is extremely helpful, first of all, to understand yourself, but also to deal with those obsessive destructive habits that you can develop.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to understand like how you channel your energy in the way that is conducive for you and more positive for you as a person. So can you tell us a little bit more about your archetypes and how now with your understanding how you apply them?
I mean, first of all, I would say I'm using a 12 archetype system that is coming from Carol Pearson. And she, on the other hand, is building on the work of Carl Jung. I have read about a lot of books from Carl Jung. It's really extremely insightful. I would say he's a genius thinker, very underrated, but it can feel a bit abstract. So I really like that model because it makes it easier to understand. So you have these 12 archetypes, but this is not like hard science, I would say. This is very fluid and there are different kind of archetypes, but this 12 archetype model gives you a simplification to really see it. And it's very easy to understand, very natural to understand. And in every one of us, these 12 archetypes are active in one form or another. They are also developed on different stages. And so you always have all of them. They're just active or repressed to a certain degree. And ideally, you want to come to that point where all these 12 archetypes are in balance. That's probably something you will never going to achieve, but that's something you can keep in mind to do the integration work. But it's also interesting to understand your highest scoring archetypes and your lowest scoring archetypes. And what I know from that, for me, for example, is the lover archetype is my lowest archetype, which makes sense in a way because there are many, like 6 of those archetypes, they come with a pair. They're usually in a pair that helps you to understand it a bit better. So the seeker and the lover archetype, they're a pair because they're kind of going into different directions. The seeker is about individuality, doing your own thing, like the solo path. But the lover is the counterpart. The lover wants to be like in connection with other people, like having a community, enjoying intimacy. That's something that was not naturally coming from me. And that's how, looking back at my story, what we were talking about, this kind of comes as a consequence of a very developed seeker archetype, for example. So this is my lowest scoring archetype. My highest scoring archetypes are sage and magician. And how I apply them is, I know the sage archetype is about studying, knowing about stuff, like going really deep, trying to find the ultimate truth, like wants to know more, questions everything. A lot about rationality. But as I was saying, like every archetype has a shadow, and the shadow of the sage is becoming disconnected from your feelings, is becoming like sitting in the ivory tower, like thinking like your advice is the only thing that applies and you can solve everything with rationality. That was deeply insightful for me because this was something that I developed through this reading thousands of books, and it's very helpful on the positive side, but on the negative side, there's also this problem like disconnecting from my feelings, for example, and relying too much on my rationality. That's why quite naturally, actually, my magician archetype was developing. And those two, by the way, are also coming together in a pair because they balance each other out. And the magician archetype for me in this moment right now is very important because it helps me to heal myself. And that's what the magician is also about. You can think about the healer, the shaman. Back in the tribe days, there was like a person in the tribe who was having like some herbs or stuff and putting ceremonies and all those kind of things to heal people, but also to heal yourself. And I'm embracing that in a way to heal my body, but on the other hand, also to transform my experience, because that's another aspect of the magician archetype is to transform situations. But the magician also knows that transformation happens from the inside out, and that's something you can see, for example, in my Substack. It's manifesting there a lot because that's also how I operate. You change first yourself from the inside, and then you can help others to transform themselves. And also to, for example, this negative experience of me being chronically ill, transforming that into something positive. And that's where it helped me a lot.
Yeah, and there's something really resonant with what you said, Philip. The power in dealing with the internal before you start to approach the external. And I know that just before we wrap up this podcast, we're going to share how people can actually access this archetype framework and do a little quiz themselves. But just out of my curiosity, because I'm very familiar with the human design, is this archetype work similar in terms of a blueprint, or is it just a completely different type of model?
You can think of it as a blueprint, like an internal psychological blueprint, like how you are made up. I started to develop my own model, but I really like having the core of the archetypes because there's sort of a spiritual element coming to that. And the archetypes are also a lot about meaning making. You could say the blueprint is, you could say it's a seed, like you're planted a seed inside of your psyche. And maybe that seed is an acorn and it wants to grow an oak. And understanding that you have that blueprint is very helpful because you know that you're supposed to be an oak. So if you're trying to be an apple tree, you will have a very hard time because that's not your blueprint.
Yeah. Just one more question, and I'm curious about this one because you are a digital nomad. At the moment, you're currently moving through Mexico. And when you are moving around, you have to rethink community entirely and I guess build connection through maybe small, meaningful encounters rather than those permanent roots. So with any of, I guess, our listeners who have considered that digital nomad life, what have you learned on the kind of road, on the move, that actually helps you create real connection with people and between people?
I mean, every person is different. So what I'm saying is like very subjective. What I realized for myself is I really don't like to be on the move all the time. It's very nice for a while, but I don't think that is a way of living because it is really hard to make those connections. You're 3 months here, 3 months there, 3 months somewhere completely else. You can try to keep those connections, but it will cost you a lot of time because you will not be able to go to the level of deepness that really makes up those meaningful connections. Having those meaningful connections and deep connections is what our psyche really needs. And that means you have to make commitments. That is something a lot of people don't want to do, especially the digital nomads, like to committing to one path, because that means you cut off other paths and you would like to go all of them. You want to have that freedom. But in my opinion, this limiting yourself is actually what's freeing yourself. When you make that commitment of, I will do this, I will stay here, for example, you start to really get a sense of freedom because it's coming in, I guess, for most listeners, it's a choice you can make. You're not forced to do it. So making that commitment is, for me, also very freeing. But I can also not really say that much about the digital nomad lifestyle because I have not lived it long enough. I'm here in Mexico, but I'm here in Mexico for 5 months and I stay a long time in the places, and it's not my first time coming here, so I speak the language. I can talk with people. What I really like is people are open. You can have a lot of small talk and it's very easy to make friends, or it's just easier than compared to Germany, for example. And so I have already established connections here, and it's also way easier like to have like these smaller encounters during the day. And this is what really makes what really fulfills me. And that's why I'm coming back. I have some friends here and I'm building really deep connections. And you also have the possibility to have like a chat here and there and to maybe to enter into another deep connection. And that is what is really fulfilling for me.
Yeah, that's such an important lesson for people who are trying the digital nomad thing like we did. You know, it's actually taking that time to plant yourself somewhere for a period of time and building that community around you, whether it's you having just these fleeting interactions with people that might extend further beyond that, you know, down the track, or making really deep connections at that moment in time.
Philipp, it's been honestly such a honor having you on today's episode. Just really understanding someone who, from a very young age, identified that they wanted to carve their own path. Whether you'd felt out of place or whatever it was, you wanted to carve a path and a career and a lifestyle that was just really, really true to you. And that takes knowing yourself. It takes that self-compassion you mentioned. It takes going through some challenging periods and overcoming the obstacles. So it's just really inspiring to have had this conversation with you. We've really loved having you on the episode today.
Yeah, likewise. It was a pleasure to be here. I think we could go on for a way longer time exploring different topics. Like there's so many things we can talk about, and that's what I really enjoyed about our conversations, and great pleasure to be here.
If you'd like to connect with Philipp, you can find Serapex, spelled Serapex, on Substack. Philipp shares lots of tips and insights about building a life grounded in genuine purpose, and also you can try out his Archetypes quiz and find out which ones you are. I highly recommend it. It's super easy to do, and you'll actually have these kind of little aha moments of going, that is actually me. I resonate with that completely. So thank you again, Philipp, for joining the podcast.
Thanks for listening to Out of Place. If something in today's episode resonated with you, let us know or share it with someone who might need it too.
Or leave us a review on Apple, a rating on Spotify, a like or comment on YouTube, because it helps more than you actually know. And you can read more about each episode's topic on Substack. We have one there as well. To learn more or connect with us, head to Instagram and look up Out of Place, spelt Plae.
We're so grateful to be building this alongside you. Here's to finding your own way, even when it feels a little bit out of place. We'll see you on the next episode.